Hi everyone and welcome back to the show. Today I have probably one of my dream episodes. Today I have the opportunity to interview two pioneers, James Quiggins and Penny Reynolds, two friends that have a long-lasting relationship connected with decades of the WFM industry. Join us in this unique opportunity to see WFM from their lens. Let's go. This episode is sponsored by Injingsu, but more on that later. Jim, Penny, thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
We're doing good. Happy to be here with you.
Thanks, Andre. Yeah.
Like I said when we were preparing for the podcast today, it's truly an honor to have you both here. I know it's super early for you, so once again, thank you one more time for the availability. And if you allow me, Jim, I would start with Penny. I would love to start with you, and I wanted if you could take us back to your early days in the industry. What are some of the initial challenges you faced, and how did you navigate them? I really wanted to hear a bit from the journey through the WFM industry from your eyes.
Okay, well, I'll try not to bore you with my whole career history, but in terms of this industry, I started in the early 80s and started with a company called Telco Research, which was one of two companies that started out in Nashville, Tennessee as a result of a project from the Graduate School of Management at Vanderbilt. So I worked for one of these companies doing primarily telecommunications consulting. So at that point, not so much the inbound. We were more concerned with how many telephone lines companies needed to talk to one another and their customers and so on. So I was doing consulting in that mode. Meanwhile, during that time in the 80s, a lot of things were happening that would really come to influence the call center world. 800 numbers had already been introduced, but not in wide use at all, the toll-free numbers. There were two companies that had developed some technology, Rockwell and Technicron, developed this brand new thing called an ACD, an automatic call distributor. So rather than calls coming into specific people, it could now go into one place and get distributed out appropriately. So that was kind of new stuff going on.
Was a technological advancement, I would say.
That was a huge technological advancement, absolutely. Jim's going to give a little bit more detail about that. He's older than me, so he knows more about that. Some companies starting to use that, and one of the first was Continental Airlines, and we think that's one of the reasons that the people that work in centers today sometimes are still referred to as agents. Back then they were ticket agents, but that's somehow, we think that's where that term came from. But for me at that point, the focus was on telecommunications and traffic engineering, primarily for companies making their calls. And then we started seeing more and more of the inbound come along. Meanwhile, over across the street, was this other company, same group of graduate students from Vanderbilt that had started Telephone Control Systems, TCS Management Group. And that group was also starting out doing all sorts of consulting, but one huge consulting project led to the need for figuring out not just how many phone lines, but the other resource, how many people need to be here to handle these calls. And so they started a program called the Manpower Planning System, would later be renamed. But all that happened in the early 80s. So all of this was sort of the 80s kind of thing. So during the time of we were out discoing and all that, all this was going on in the technology
Penny
world.
still discos from time to time.
Whenever I can.
It's not something that's particularly fun to watch, but
yeah. So I think I would say if we're talking about the sort of the birth of workforce management, kind of happened in the late 80s. Again, the technology making it happen to distribute calls, those kinds of things had happened with operator services and so on. I think Jim's going to touch on that. But I would say really the birth of all this really started in the late 80s, which is the time that I then came across the street from Telco Research over to TCS Management Group, which at the time I was the 13th employee there. And then I continued to do consulting and then moved into marketing. And that's how Jim and I started working together. He was sales and I was marketing. But Jim, I'm going to let you sort of add some thoughts about this whole history thing.
While Penny was speaking, it occurred to me that the kind of story of the contact center evolution really is a story of the telecom technology, IT technology, and then human resource utilization and management. Those kind of three threads, if you will, would be one way to look at how the industry has evolved over the last 30 plus years. As Penny mentioned, kind of my draw into the industry, just on a personal note, was I'd been in higher education. I was a university professor, and fortunately for me, I landed in an industry and a discipline that kind of lends itself to an educator's mindset because of both mathematical algorithms involved and some of the complexity involved in the technology itself. As she alluded, in terms of workforce planning, the earliest days were in operator services. And you, as a young man, have probably seen these ancient pictures of all of these operators with cords.
With the switches, yes.
Yes, exactly. And those were PBX switchboards, private branch exchange or public branch exchange switchboards. And there was the task of saying, how many operators do we need? Not only for general operator services, but for what became known as 411 calls. And they actually referred to the scheduling process as tours. And for some time in the industry, you would, instead of schedules, they would talk about a tour. As some things changed in terms of regulation of the telecom industry, and we can perhaps go down that path at some point, but the whole idea of serving customers through a bank of operators or agents or customer service reps, if you will, became commercialized. And there were just a handful of technology providers. This coincided again with kind of IT and computer technology development at the time, who had developed software that incorporated these very complicated queuing algorithms and probability theory to make these determinations based on traffic, based on volume, and based on other variables like what level of service did you want to provide to customers. And so we were both fortunate to land with a company that was actually started. We have these close ties to Vanderbilt University, which is based here, that had done consulting in this area. And when they would go in with a technology provider who had the infrastructure platform and talk about the things that could be done in terms of calculating both the facilities that were needed. At this time, a lot of the telecom facilities there was a very complicated tariff. And so it was very costly if you didn't have the optimization both of the telecom facilities as well as then the staff, which, as we know, becomes the single largest expense in operating a call center. They would go in and speak about these types of capabilities, and it would capture the attention of the likes of Continental Airlines, no longer in existence as an airline, but also for this company that we were with, TCS, American Express, who was one of the leaders in the US in terms of providing support services to their card members through these then called call centers, if you will. And that led to kind of a follow-on conversation that said, hey, we're intrigued about this. Can you actually write software that does this? And the answer was yes. And so a company called TCS, which later was acquired by Aspect, now known as Alvaria, company called TCS, at the time a company called Affinitech, and a company called Cybernetics were kind of the three pioneers in terms of software that addressed this human resource planning capability. So those were kind of the early days. We get caught up in reminiscing, and then we remind ourselves that probably most people don't care that much about what happened 30 plus years ago.
I actually was going to say that it's really fascinating, even though I knew part of the story. There is some of the details you shared, like it's mesmerizing, like the advance that not only the industry itself, but and we have been speaking a lot about technology nowadays. That is a huge automation and AI technology booms. This is like history repeating itself. It's just like it happened a while back. It will continue to happen across generations and across industries. And I think it's always good to know where you came from, because that helps define the actual problems and variables we're trying to solve, and actually validates that some of them are still the same. It's just that the perspectives are different, or the resources you have available are different as well. For me, super exciting to know that. And I actually wanted to, if you don't mind, Jim, to continue with you. One thing you mentioned some of the challenges that the centers at the time faced. I like the visualization you started in the beginning, from that evolution to the human resource slash contact center. Like it really started there. I wanted your view on, so when you move from 30 years ago to today, some of the existing call centers and service centers still face persisting issues. Some of them are very similar. How is the approach on overcoming those over time, and what is your take on, like, across the years, did that change the approach? Did the challenge change dramatically? Are the problems no longer the same? Are they still the same? I probably by mistake said that they are similar, but I wanted to know your thoughts here.
Yeah, I think they're similar in that they are still challenging. If you were to consolidate, and this is a bit of an artificial construct, but if you were to consolidate your thinking to this technology stream and this human stream, which has all kinds of implications that we may touch on later in terms of artificial intelligence and its role in the contact center, et cetera, you see a shift. Technology always moves toward commoditization, and I think that's a trend that will continue. And we used to say that we didn't have a corner on bright, resourceful programmers. That's true, as fond as I am of German engineering and of InVision and the Injixo software. The key is not only having talented programmers to create software to solve complicated problems, but the differentiation becomes on this human side. And that's still true and still a challenge, I think, in the contact center industry as a whole. Although the move has been to try to eliminate the human element in any number of ways possible, and many of them appropriately so, because it's also costly. It's kind of messy when you have to deal with human elements. But I think that the challenges that remain are not dramatically different, but the magnitude of them and the nuance has shifted. I have some responses. Penny wants to jump in here too, so I need to tie a ribbon around some of this stream of consciousness here. But the primary challenges that I see remain on the human resource side. Agent attrition remains, in my view, the most significant unresolved industry challenge. Quite frankly, some of that is because being a contact center agent is, in many instances, not a very pleasant job. The expectations that both the employer and the consumer have on those individuals just makes it really difficult and leads to these high attrition rates. And then I can talk some more about this, but
we'll go there. I was going to say, Penny, to bring you to the conversation. So I'm curious, when based on this story, when did you find the appeal to actually become the founder partner of the contact center school? I would love to know the story beneath, but knowing the story behind, and I really wanted to tie that story with what Jim was saying about solving these different problems and the perception issues. And how do you think that creating this helped shaping the profession of professionals and improving professionals as well over time?
Okay, yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to jump in. If you talk about the challenges back then and now, I think one of the biggest ones is just people. The software has changed, technology has evolved so greatly, but there's still the need to understand the fundamentals of all these things. And I think that's where in the early days at TCS, we really set ourselves apart. As a matter of fact, our tagline for the company was the solution is service. And as Jim said, there was no, we didn't have the best programmers in the world. Well, they were great. But what set that company apart was the service and the education and support behind the tool. And so from the early days, and from my early days, even coming before TCS, I taught a lot of classes. So as I came into TCS and took over a marketing role, we basically marketed by educating people. I wrote a lot of articles. I did a lot of conference speeches. And, there was this following of people that were just so hungry for basic information about the fundamental principles of workforce management, how past data can help you predict the future, and how many people do you need and why, and what's the impact of a few more, a few less people. So that became such a huge thing. And as you talk about the evolution, that same talk that I did, 25, 30 years ago, I still do at the annual SWPP conference of workforce planners, and all the new people that are there, they're there just like writing down everything I say and whatever. It's like, how can this still be relevant 30 years later? But it is. It's the basic fundamental knowledge. And I think that is one thing that's really carried through. But again, it's all about the people part. And I think how TCS set itself apart. And that's actually why you asked me about the call center school. Yeah. While at TCS, we discovered that people were hungry for education. We had a very successful marketing campaign, is what it started out to be, but we created this call center showcase tour. Jim and I came up with that idea where people wanted to go see other call centers that were, with best practices. So we really pinpointed our stellar customers. And of course, from a sales and marketing perspective, we wanted those centers to be visited so they could see our software in action. But we also wanted people to go see best practices. And so we would do some classes. They would see things as they should be done and so on. As part of TCS, we just kept seeing people are hungry for education. So we started a division at TCS called Call Center University. And it was primarily workforce management training, but we started branching out into call center supervision and performance management in general and so on. As TCS was acquired by Aspect, and we're part of a much bigger corporation now, and it wasn't where we thought the education belonged. So a few of us kind of split off and started the call center school. And we started out with the traditional in-person training. We decided we were tired of training. And back in 2001, we thought, wouldn't it be a great idea if we taught via web seminars? So people could see our slides and hear us talk, and maybe even some video. And so we started a whole series of web seminars. They weren't very popular at first because people were not used to this sort of learning via a podcast and web classes and Zoom and all that. So it was a slow start, but I mean, this, I kind of really hate to tell this part of it, but it impacted our business. We were not seeing a huge uptake in web classes. And then I'm telling you, it's 2001. Remember what happened in September of 2001. So after September 11th, people were very reluctant to travel and so on. And so all of a sudden people were like, hey, what about those web classes? And that part of our business took off like crazy. And then that expanded into, asynchronous learning and e-learning and so on. But it was, we that first year we had 26 topics. We delivered one a week, and we developed them one a week for the first 26 weeks of the year. And then we repeated, and we eventually grew the curriculum to over 50 classes and so on. But I think it's still true today that I see, I go to a trade show, a conference, our SWPP, the Workforce Planners Conference, and there's so much amazing technology, but people are still hungry. They're still coming to those fundamental classes for that basic understanding. So I think that is something that's always been a challenge and is very similar from the 1980s to today. That same issue.
And if you allow me, first saying that I have used the services of the contact center school for my teams in the past. And one of the things you mentioned, and it's countless the amount of times we speak about education, and education by the professionals in the industry, where they are coming from. Jim, you mentioned about that not being a super appealing job sometimes from the outside. So when people think about it, and the truth is that there is not a clear path when people are in universities or studying to actually join this industry. So it's normally by accident the majority of the times, and these programs really help elevate the professionals, I think, and that's, for me, it's important to say, because I think it creates a contribute to what the future is for the industry. I still think there is I don't know what your thoughts are, and probably I would ask the question, because you have been doing this for a longer time. I still think that we don't have a very clear standard of what is best in class. I think we have a sense of more or less what that look like, but it's very different between countries, between regions, between sectors in the industry. But hopefully one day, and this is something like I'm very passionate about, is that curriculum and working with universities to prepare future professionals for the industry based on whatever the requirements and the needs are for the future.
Yeah, we actually did that back in the early 2000s, 2003 or 4. University of Phoenix, which is sort of in the U.S. the biggest sort of virtual university program. They came to us and we helped them develop their curriculum as a university curriculum for call center management. And at the time, we were honored to have been asked to write the textbooks for those, not knowing that turning out a 200-page textbook every month was going to be such an ordeal. But we became very efficient authors at that point in our in the company. It was a good thing for us to do. It helped with our development and our own courseware development and so on. But yeah, that was really the first sort of university curriculum that came about in terms of call center management. And a big part of that was the workforce management piece. That's one of the biggest things you have to be able to know and do.
Yeah. So let me go to technology in a second.
But Andre, could I just interject one thing here before we shift? I think, and this will sound like a blatant pitch, as it were, but part of what you've heard was the motivation and reasoning behind InVision acquiring the call center school. InVision, likewise, a technology company, started scheduling, addressing the scheduling and staffing tasks in the bakery industry in 1995. But as that company evolved, recognizing the strong human element and the importance of the human resource, the mission guiding vision statement at InVision is, we care deeply about people at work. And from that, it logically extends into not only technology, but also how that technology is utilized to create a better human experience at work. And that's why it's relevant in terms of thinking of what the contact center agent experience is like. We talk so much about customer experience, and appropriately so. What really influences that customer experience is the agent experience. And to your earlier comment, as much as companies in general will talk about the contact center as being their profit center, their customer facing, in large part, it's still treated as a cost center. I may be somewhat jaded on that point, having spent all these years in the industry. And that's this balance of optimization, if you will. We've seen it in the naming that the analysts drive from workforce management initially to workforce optimization, WFM to WFO, and the most recent is WEM, workforce employee management or engagement, workforce engagement management. And it shows the recognition and the shift. Again, acknowledging my own biases, I think the workforce planning sector of the suite of products that are now in place to address human optimization and human resource development and use has a bit of a unique character as Penny mentioned, because of kind of the conceptual underpinnings that drive the decisions that software allows you to make. You can write software to do anything except wing it, except make some human judgments. You can even write now with AI software and machine learning to do much of that. And certainly companies will pursue it and are pursuing it, and technology has the momentum and always will. How we balance that with the human experience, both in terms of even in the case of AI and the whole notion of, will it ever become sentient? Will it ever be able to have the human characteristics? There's a reason it's called artificial intelligence and not real intelligence. Perhaps in some world in the future, there will be the capacity for empathy and understanding and feeling and emotion, or something simulating that so closely that the perceiver cannot distinguish between it. We're not quite there yet, as strong as AI, and it's inevitable in its use. But anyway, just my stumping there for a little bit in terms of this human characteristic. That's why offerings like the call center school, addressing the human element and how it interplays with the technology advances, remain so important.
I agree. And Jim, I think that helps even more the segue to technology that I was going to do, because from your story, personal stories, and from the stories of the industry, it's super clear that technology has evolved. And you spoke that as people evolved, and we evolved leveraging technology to become better and to solve problems in a different way. So technology, to a certain extent, has been as well on a driving force for what WFM and work for, like you mentioned, WFO, VM are today. So there is definitely a clear transformation that empowered by technology, because like we were speaking a while back, the problems are still similar, but what changes the different technologies in the channels that we support today that are moved from just phone to email that I mean 20 years ago probably was a very different type of email. So Penny and Jim, my question would be your thoughts on the technology advancements that we have seen within workforce management, and how did they shape the way service centers or contact centers operate today?
I think in general, again, driven by business efficiency demands, that there is a obvious shift away from human interaction to a digital first. And many of the technology companies tout that as a part of their offering, which is understandable and appropriate. For some time, and I can remember many years ago, the objective seemed to be not only to get the right number of people at the right time, but to get fewer and fewer people needed because, again, of the significant cost associated with that. So I think if we're talking about the kind of trends in this way, and in terms of the technology, it will drive more and more self-service and self-directed decision-making and information on the part of the consumer, which will require fewer humans, if you will, to address the kind of routine issues. It will also require that those that do address issues have a higher skill level, because the problems, once they get to the beyond the digital contact,
way more
and beyond the self kind of service, those are going to be the more complicated problems. That has not historically necessarily been the way contact centers have been viewed. It's been a frontline kind of triage, and it's totally appropriate that we automate those types of tasks. But I think we'll see then on the back end more self-determined, self-service approach to scheduling and staff utilization, the whole gig worker kind of approach, where individuals that work in these roles will have more autonomy over their own kind of work schedule. One of the principles, again, at InVision that we adhere to is that these three primary motivators in life: autonomy, mastery, and a sense of purpose. And to the extent that a contact center worker, if you will, agent, rep, or whatever, can achieve those elements in their life, the more satisfying the work will be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of an inevitable trend. I think the medium will be more and more SMS, secured messaging, and chat. That's a generational phenomenon. My adult children seldom answer the phone nor use the phone. And I think the new consuming public will want that kind of instant on via either chat or text messaging. Social media, yes, but there's another whole kind of dynamic associated with social media.
And now a word to our sponsor, InJinxo. With InJinxo, simplicity meets power. It's a complete cloud-based AI-driven WFM solution that optimizes processes from start to finish, including forecasting, scheduling, and real-time monitoring. Empowering employees with mobile-optimized self-service portal makes employee engagement an integral part of workforce management. It combines cutting-edge functionality and seamless integration with leading contact center platform. For more information, please check the first link on the description. And now, back to the podcast.
Penny, do you want to give us your take on this one?
Yeah, really just for what Jim said, I think it was talking about evolution of the technology. I mean, we've just seen that from the point way back when, IVR was introduced, and that provided the first sort of self-service. And what did we see? Fewer contacts coming in? Maybe, but the ones that were they gotten the routine stuff out of the way. And that has just grown exponentially with AI and all of the options folks have to solve their own problems online. So what's actually making it into the contact center and to a human representative are the more difficult, challenging things, or where someone's already upset and it's no longer a transaction. You need someone that understands how to do the human interaction. I had someone say, and I love this, that now our agents have to be smarter than Google. And so finding those people, number one, and I want to touch on this in just a minute, how do you find these people? It's a different makeup of the workforce now, but then training them, not just in the transaction pieces, which is pretty much easy now with all the tools we have, but where to find information that the person who's already been on the website and everywhere else can't find, and how to do the calming thing, the reassuring, the interaction. So the transaction piece just gets easier and easier and easier. It's the interaction piece that makes the difference and what the customer will remember and experience and want to come back to. So that's the key. And we're sort of transitioning, out of technology into the people side of it. But I just wanted to support what Jim was saying and finding meaningful work and those three things he just said. Jim and I sort of at the same time discovered this book by Daniel Pink years ago called Drive. And it's talking about how we motivate individuals in the workplace and how it's a different thing. And sometimes what we used to do with here's a prize, here's a trinket, do this 3 times, and here's a tickets or something. There's still somewhat of a role for that, but that supports and motivates people if they're just in a mindless remote, checking out groceries or something. But the kind of knowledge workers we have now, that's almost demeaning motivation. So we need that autonomy, sense of purpose, that and finding, number one, the kind of people that will be motivated doing this kind of work, and then training them properly, and then keeping them motivated in new and unique ways, I think is really critical. So the technology has helped the transaction part so much, but it's given us a different problem to solve in terms of the human resource side.
I was going to pick on what you all said and ask you a question, which is, when we look at the contact center, and Jim, you touched a bit on this, so there are persons that refer to a huge percentage of being a cost center. A few really try to say, oh no, we are a revenue center, others experience center service. There are multiple definitions. Personal feeling is what we see technology trying to solve is the cost center piece. not enlarging the
Agreed.
experience, not necessarily boosting the revenue or optimizing the service. Like you both mentioned that the complexity of what remains is different. So by nature, you mentioned better than Google. So we need people that have different skill sets. Do you see that what do you think that technology, when you look at the technology enhancements, like specifically with AI, do you notice any difference in focus, or do we still aim for the same cost?
Well, I think it has to do with how we use technology. There is no intent on the part of technology to ignore humanity or the human elements, if you will. Technology by nature makes life easier. And I think that becomes then, how is it utilized and implemented in terms of AI and machine learning? The holy grail from a technological perspective in workforce planning has always been the absolute precise, accurate forecast of the future. The reality is that sometimes history is a great representation of the future. Sometimes it isn't. How do we know when it isn't? Well, humans learn that. They discern it. They have critical thinking skills. I used to say that spreadsheets in the hands of a well-educated, well-informed planner using spreadsheets to manipulate the algorithms and create schedules, etc., versus the most sophisticated software in the hands of a less informed or hardly informed educated user, the other would still yield better results. I still believe that. I think more and more pieces of that, again, it's kind of like with when I use OpenAI or ChatGPT, and I see now that there are classes on how to create the right prompts for AI. That becomes the critical thinking skill. Technology, including AI, will have its biggest impact on the routine, mundane, may I say, non-satisfying type of jobs. That's why we care about the nature of work and the changing nature of work that people do. And that's a good thing. Let's elevate kind of the work experience so that it does call for those uniquely human elements. So technology in and of itself, I don't think is intended to create a less satisfying work experience, just the opposite. And in some instances, in terms of how it is deployed and used, I think to the point I made earlier that you highlighted, it is looking at reducing cost, creating greater efficiency. Nothing wrong with those goals and motives whatsoever. So I think the task becomes for leaders and leadership to discern then what is the best use of human resource and how is it enabled by the advancing technology that we have. I'm not a doomsayer at all about AI. I embrace it. I'm fascinated by it. I think it holds great promise. And I think it's inevitable. I think we do not stop the march of technology, nor should we. I happen to believe that that's good for the human experience and will continue to serve us. Figuring out how that changes the nature of work becomes a uniquely human task for leaders, organizational leaders, for whom within their purview are these things we call contact centers, which, by the way, Penny and I talked a little bit about this, a decade ago or whatever it may be. We changed from call centers to contact centers. I'm not sure what the word is, but the word center doesn't serve us very well anymore. Here we are participating remotely, sitting in a hotel room. We're at a trade event. Most of those representatives, associates, consultants, agents, whatever they're called, they're working from home or from
remote places,
mobile devices,
the coffee shop.
They're not working from centers in the sense that term was initially applied.
I agree. We need to redefine it. So Penny, if you allow me, Jim, just to go to Penny to ask a question. So you mentioned something that I really like, which is you mentioned the people learning how to do prompts to use AI. And I wanted to step a bit back on you mentioned a lot about education and about the contact center school. How different it is from just asking the right question when you are uninformed, when you have a problem. There is a lot of people that say that it's more important to teach the ability to learn than actually teaching how to actually do the problem, because then you can search, you can find it yourself, and you have a different outcome from people. But I wanted to have your thoughts, since you have been so deeply connected with learning over the years. Like, how different do you think it is?
Well, I like what you said. I think for me, with a liberal arts education back, I didn't really learn anything that I needed for any sort of job. I was a psychology major, for heaven's sake. But during those 4 years, I learned how to learn. And I think that is what we would hope is coming out of our certainly university system and so on, the ability just to take whatever problem in front of you and figure it out and learn, and how to use different resources and how to get there, and then how to, again, very importantly, communicate that to another person. So I think that's critical. And I think as we look at this new workforce we have, once again, they're having to handle a much more complicated sort of question. The people have already been out and tried to figure it out on their own. That's why they're calling. They wouldn't call in the first place. Well, some people would, like my mother would, or my whatever, but most are not going to do that. So they've got a difficult challenge. So they've got to be able to think on their feet, know how to find the information, really listening. One of the critical pieces of, I think, training these folks is listening skills. Not just let me hear one word and that leads me to, let me put that in the search, but really listening to the words being spoken, as well as the emotions being conveyed by those words and other clues. And then figuring out the problem. And then the other key is how to communicate it back. And I think that's one of the critical pieces that's often missing when I look at, when I talk to folks on the phone. I like to be, sometimes I will call just to see how they're handling calls. And I always, feel the need to give them usually a compliment after. It's like, hey, I did this for years, and I just want you to know you did a fabulous job, and I hope this is being recorded, and because you need credit for this. You handled things very well. But also note, I don't always tell them directly about, if only they had known to ask me this or do this, and that's really missing sometimes. Yeah,
I think that's one of the risks, that we have so automated some of the elements of the role that it doesn't, in the mind of the staff member, they don't exercise that problem solving muscle. And the really strong performers, almost in any profession, I would argue, they are lifelong learners, and they're really drawn to problem solving. There are times that the difficult problem makes me want to turn and go the easy route, but there's some strange thing that happens, even if it's an irate, difficult customer or situation. Even if I recognize that I have culpability, or the company that I've represented has culpability, I want to dive in the middle of that and fix it.
You're like, bring it.
And Penny and I we kind of are kindred spirits in that regard, whether it's competing with each other who gets through the fastest security line at an airport.
I can imagine you both running.
Or digging in you can't do that today, but when you prompted us with a few prep questions about humorous experiences, there was a time when trade shows and trade events were in their prime, and something didn't arrive when it should have arrived, and we were allowed to go into a dispatch area and dig through a FedEx truck to find our package.
The others were not problem solving fast enough for us.
That's right.
So
We want it now.
we went
Will
in
you let
ourselves.
us in there? Will you let us? And in that time
That's
period,
correct.
they would. That wouldn't happen
It wouldn't
now.
happen now. Yeah.
But the point of that being, the role of curiosity. I mean, most of my career in technology has been in sales and business development and sales management. The role of curiosity in sales success, and I think in success in general, is major. I am drawn to people that have this innate or just inherent, it's in their DNA to be curious, to want to know more, to learn more. And so can we find those individuals, which I think will be more and more in demand, because as Penny alluded, anybody can, there's this term, you may edit this out, GTS, anybody can Google that shit, almost anybody. But when it comes to what you do with it and how you bring that to the problem at hand, and some problems, I don't mean problems are always negative, it's just the task at hand, to make that a satisfying experience in light of the goal or objective. That's that key developmental kind of element. You want to create organizations that encourage that. And you want people to represent your organization to bring that to the task in serving your customers.
Yeah, I will take on what you were saying, and you mentioned before the comparison between the different professionals and how they are. We keep them the skill set being the differentiator. So, despite all the advancements in technology, I would say and argue that the human aspect and the skill set still remains the most vital part of the equation. And when I look at workforce management, one of the recent shifts I noticed, at least in my career, even though it's not as long as yours, what I noticed is that there is a much bigger people-centric approach when we are dealing with problems. We try to put ourselves in the perspective of the other person on the other side. While back in the day, even when I started, was very straightforward, very numbers oriented, like one more, one less, we couldn't care. We couldn't care much. How do you see the roles within workforce management changing over time? Like one of the things that a previous guest said is that the skill set is very different compared to what it used to be before. I would love to have your thoughts. What do you think?
And the skill set of the workforce
professionals,
planner,
okay.
the individuals
that
are charged with doing the workforce planning. You want to go first? You want to?
Well, I see that it's a much more sophisticated, well-rounded person. I'm very involved. I helped start SWPP, Society of Workforce Planning Professionals. And so I participate in that conference every year. It's like been going over 20 years now. And there's always a Workforce Management Professional of the Year award. And when you hear the nominations and what these people have done, it's like, wow, I never could have done any of that and earned that award. I mean, it's really amazing the skills they have, the analytical skills, but also what Jim was saying, the curiosity. The top 5, the finalists, you hear those projects they've done, and they have figured out some new way to do something, and it was non-traditional, and they've tried something new, and it worked. But a lot of that had to do with really understanding, and more, there's more and more shift to scheduling around the needs of the employees rather than scheduling the employees around the needs of the business. So really, we've got these way more valuable people to us now. They have to be smarter, trained better. So it's really important that we keep them. So let's make them as happy as possible. And the good news is, with this gig economy and then working these bizarre sets of schedules, 4 hours here, 3 hours here, gosh, that's exactly what we've been needing over the years that we couldn't do with split shifts and all that. But now it's possible. Thank God we have the tools to figure out all the math, but it's enabled us to schedule to those folks' needs more. And that's what I see with these new workforce managers, professionals. It's just so exciting to see the growth and evolution of that whole industry and field. again, but much of it is trending towards
Mm-hmm.
still all about cost savings. Don't get me wrong, but doing it in such innovative ways is
Mm-hmm.
exciting to see.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think maybe there's a movement, particularly in enterprise class operations, that recognize individuals in the role of using this technology, this technology being sophisticated workforce management tools, is a high level skill set. Historically, we've had this term that the career path in a contact center or call center used to be agent, supervisor, and then what's next? Well, one of the options might be either in quality assurance or in workforce planning. And one of the things we've always said is keep in mind that ability is not a skill. And so if you're looking to fill those positions, just because somebody has done well on this kind of path, and I think in the enterprise class operations, there's recognition of that. And it does call for this kind of combination of some aptitude or comfort with mathematics and technology, because it's so embedded there, just in terms of an understanding, not that you have to do the calculation or the algorithms, which are mind-boggling. That's what software is created to do, and AI and machine learning. But then the application of that technology are along the attributes and characteristics that we've discussed. The interesting thing is that the so-called long tail of the market is towards smaller contact centers. You'll still have the large enterprise class, the 50 agent, 100 agent, maybe even 200 agent, that all of a sudden you've grown and you have this business. There was a time early on when this happened and people didn't know they were a call center. They didn't call them that. We alluded to kind of come full circle when the toll-free numbers were offered by, at the time, AT&T. There was something called the 1-800 Club. And I kind of cut my teeth in sales. The 1-800 Club in the US was any company that had a toll-free number. And I got a hold of this list and I would call this number and somebody would answer and they would say, this is Andre with Timberland. How can I help you? And I would say, well, who my name was, and I was with the company TCS, and we provide a software solution for call centers. About 50% of the time, they would say, what's a call center? To which I would reply,
how many of you are there?
Exactly. And then they were centers. If you look around yourself, how many people are doing what you do? And you said, oh, there are 5 or 6 of us. I said, well, our solution is typically designed for when you get 35, 40, 50 and above. And occasionally I would say, oh, somebody would answer and they would say, well, I don't know. There are probably several hundred of us here in this abandoned Kmart or whatever big box store. And then the lights would go off in my mind and I knew I had a prospect. So they didn't even call themselves call centers. That's happening now in this long tail of the market. Small operations, they start recognizing, hey, we need to get better at this. And we've had some growth and what technology is available. That's a prime opportunity for education, for the call center school, as it were, because again, that's the underpinning to the things that we've mentioned before about how to use technology. It's technology. The call center school is what we say technology agnostic or independent. It is not training on using a given software solution. It's training on addressing on a range of areas for frontline staff in terms of how to deal with difficult calls, for example, or listening skills, et cetera. Supervisors who may not have had any leadership training or coaching training, as well as in the specialty areas of workforce planning and knowing a bit about what the concepts are that the technology is enabling.
And I really like the way you pictured it on that learning piece, because if we go full circle with what you said in the beginning, so you can have professionals like, and I think this, I think Penny said that it's about knowing how to learn, but also teach the fundamental skills that then help you, regardless of the software, regardless of the challenge. You have, your brain can start going places, thinking about how to address the problem. It's the problem solving aspect that you mentioned before that I really like that, that you mentioned it. So I wanted to go a bit more personal. So you already shared your experience moving back, like, I don't know how many years. I'm quite sure that you have more stories.
You're kind not to put a number on how many the years are. Thank you.
I was trying to count, but I can't recall. But I was going to say, so you already shared stories about trying to find within FedEx, trying to find missing items. But I wanted to go back onto your journey together as professionals. Surely there are stories that you could be a good laugh, but is there any particular story that could be like a rookie mistake or something that you'll be like, oof?
I'm gonna let Penny go first. I just want to say that at the outset.
Well, so during our years, Jim and I, Jim headed up sales and I headed up marketing for many years together. So we had the opportunity to experiment, again, finding new solutions to problems. So one of our solutions to gain attention at trade shows, we're from Nashville, so we thought, let's do some kind of music stuff. And then at one trade show, Jim had actually hired the shoe shine guy to come over, and we would give people free coupons to go get their shoe shine. So we decided to put those two together, and we hired some singers and a shoe shine guy. So the shoe shine guy taught the singers how to. So we set up part of our trade show booth as singing shoe shines.
And this was a time at which it mattered in a business attire. I should mention that. Yeah,
people dressed up.
Yeah.
Okay, I can imagine.
I went and found somebody that could shine shoes because I had a number of sales staff, men in this case, that showed up, and I thought, your shoes look terrible. I'm going to go over here and have your shoes shine. And then this evolved, as Penny said, into the singing.
What if they could sing while they were shining?
Say that 3 times. And singing shoe shine.
Well, and the idea was brilliant because we would get people in our booth, draw them in with the singers who were fantastic. And then you sit there, have your shoes on. We've got a captive audience there. And you've got to listen to our spiel while you're getting your shoes shine. So it was actually more popular with the guys. Women didn't really want to sit up there and have their
It just strikes me how that era.
Yeah, and everyone around us hated it because it was noisy and it was whatever. So
I can imagine.
But we became noticed.
We were noticed, and that's what marketing's about, right?
I was going to say, sometimes any attention is good attention.
Yeah, we've actually done some. We had customers in one year, and they're in Nashville. We took them to a recording studio and actually recorded a song about workforce management and scheduling.
It's called "Work This Schedule Tonight." Something like that, which at the time was also a country song, similar.
Could you, would you, ain't you gonna? If I asked you, would you want to work this schedule tonight?
I was hoping we wouldn't have to endure an actual rendition.
I was going to ask, but I apparently I didn't have
That's
to.
all you're gonna get. That's all you're gonna get.
You had amazing careers, and we are getting close to the end. And one of the things I wanted to take from you is, what advice would you give to someone that is entering now the contact center industry, or not center, let's say this space, this industry, or workforce management specifically, considering all the experience you have accumulated? Like, what advice would you give to someone?
Want me to go first?
Sure.
Well, I gave this some thought. Again, you gave us some questions to think about earlier. And just like I was saying, these workforce management professionals of the year, they were always kind of looking for a new challenge. And I think I would say that, like, don't just go the easy path. I hate for someone to see someone that's gotten a job. It's like, oh yeah, it's like 8 to 5 and I'm done. I don't have to think about it anymore. And like, oh, that can't be very exciting or much potential in that. So I think choose the hard path. And there's 2 favorite quotes that I found. These are both kind of American. I know you have a global audience. These are both American things, but Kennedy, as he was coming into office, said, talking about the space programs, that we choose to go to the moon and do other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. And then one of my favorite movies is A League of Their Own, about the women who took over baseball for a while. And the star player, Dottie, she decides to quit and go home at the end of the season. And Coach Tom Hanks is asking her, "Why are you leaving?" She said, it just got too hard. And he says, "Too hard? We love it because it's hard. If it were easy, everybody would do it. It's the hard that makes it great." And I think that's it. I like to look for it. I like challenging things, whether it's learning a new sport or a new something. I still am online taking college classes now I don't want to tell you how old I am, but I like to learn new things and experience new things. And that sort of attribute, I think, has really served me well throughout my career, doing my work, but always looking for what else can I do? What's the next challenge? And it's opened a lot of doors for me. So I'd say go for the hard stuff.
Jim, what would be yours?
I've alluded to some of it, I think, already. This commitment to lifelong learning and kind of having a problem solver mindset, almost seeing every situation as a problem. The notion problem has the word problem has these kind of negative connotations, but it's kind of like improve everything. Yeah, this is great. How can we make it marginally at sometimes? How can we make it better? And I think that's kind of the advice I would give in terms of a mindset. We kind of shared, this idea of looking at some inspirational kinds of messages. I've had this love-hate relationship with retirement for about the last 10 years. I keep thinking I'll do that, whatever that is. And about 3 years ago, I was with InVision previously as a part of the acquisition of the call center school when I joined Penny and Maggie, and when InVision acquired the call center school. And then I left and did some other things and kind of thought maybe this was the time. But I'd stayed in touch with Peter Bolenbeck, the CEO there. And a little over 3 years ago, I was drawn back by Peter's vision of a transformational organization as a result of just some of his personal growth and experiences. And kind of was drawn back into this industry that's hard to leave. The contact center industry has a certain draw to it, the technology, the human elements, or whatever. And I think part of what we try to do and what the advice I would give is to cultivate the desire and openness to learn. A couple of my authors, there's a author, Chris McGough, who wrote a book called The Primes. It has a rather auspicious subtitle of How Any Group Can Solve Any Problem. And he talks about trust the universe. Most of what is needed is available in the universe, and visualize beyond what you know. And I think that's one of the elements of advice. The other is from a technology icon, and you may have heard it, your listeners may have heard it, Steve Jobs, who said, "We're here to put a dent in the universe. Otherwise, why else be here?" And I'm drawn to that. Just a dent. I think my contribution, I hope not to overestimate it. I don't think it's been significant on a major scale, but to have the opportunity to work with colleagues like Penny and to work with the team that I work with now and other individuals, to work with you, Andre, is enriching. And I think making the most of those interactions and those human relationships is energizing to me.
It was a tremendous pleasure to have you on the show. I know we are way above what I expected the time to be, but to kind of summarize, any final message to the listeners from your side?
I think I've opined enough.
Me too.
And appreciate.
One more thing is, if you get the chance to work with good friends throughout the years, what could be better?
Uh, I'm sure it makes life much easier when you are sharing the journey with friends. I can see you on the way you speak that you have been doing this for such a long time that it's all about having fun. I normally say that to my team. We spend so much time together. Let's have fun while we are in the workspace. It makes life much easier because then when we got away from the work, we have our family and we can relax because we don't have
Mhm.
the problems to carry. And sometimes work is just our extended family.
I agree.
It's always
A friend of mine, I heard her, another associate of mine, comment about this concept of work-life balance. Often, kind of puts these two elements of our
like
lives,
polarities.
yeah, and it's really more like a tapestry. And if
Mhm.
you can interweave and find work that brings meaning to all of life, it may not be on a par with the same meaning you derive out of family and children and dear friends, but those two things do not have to be in polar opposition, uh, work life and personal life. And as Penny said, if you can find that kind of opportunity, colleagues, even if they are for a relatively short period of time, that enliven you and encourage you and provide,
Mhm.
kind of the energizing that you're looking for. It's a precious thing.
Thank you, Jamie, Penny. Once more, thank you for joining today.
Having us.
Yes,
This was
yeah.
fun for us. Thank
all
you.
all the best for your future endeavors. And I will be watching from the outside the remaining of your journey.
Well, let's add each other to our network and make this an occasional, if not regular, kind of contact. And thank
Mhm.
you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
The episode today was sponsored by Injingso. For more, visit the first link on the